Welcome back to the Deep Dive. In our last session, we really dug into this idea of governmental abdication, how these critical services are being handed off to private tech platforms.
That's right. And today, we're shifting gears. We're moving from the why it happened to the how.
Exactly. This is the operational manual. We're going to unpack the specific technical exploits that are, well, turning all this digital convenience into a giant decryption machine.
And more importantly, we're going to outline the immediate actionable defenses that you can actually use.
I think that's the key part. So last time we set the stage, we talked about how this widespread trust in hyper-efficient tech basically created a vacuum.
A power vacuum. And our mission today, based on our source material, is to understand precisely how that vacuum became a weapon.
We're going from high-level strategy to, field-level defense.
Exactly. We're detailing the exploits and then detailing the fixes.
And before we jump in, we have to ground this conversation in the context the source gave us.
Yeah.
Which is, it's pretty unusual.
It is. This isn't theoretical. The source makes it clear that this information, the sort of training session we're relaying, it's being recorded just 300 feet from the former FBI director Robert Mueller's home.
Which is an incredibly specific detail. It really changes the stakes, doesn't it?
It completely transforms the discussion. It's not some academic exercise in network security anymore.
Right. It becomes an active, real-world conflict scenario.
It emphasizes that these aren't just abstract vulnerabilities on a whiteboard. These are active, targeted exploits. They're being deployed right now against high-level figures in their own homes.
So we're dealing with immediate, acute national security concerns.
We are. So as we unpack this, we have to focus on the core technical attack vector.
Which the source calls aggregators.
Right. These foundational systems. Your operating system, your web browser, the very protocols that make the internet work.
So we're moving from just observing the abdication to really detailing the engineering flaws that make it all possible.
That's the plan.
Okay, so to get into this, we have to start with the adversary, who, according to the source, is behind all of this.
To really grasp the threat, we have to be clear. The source material explicitly and without ambiguity names the Communist Party of China, the CPC.
And they identify them as the ultimate force behind these global network operations they've been tracking.
Yes. But here we have to make a really critical distinction, one that the source insists on and one that we are just impartially reporting on.
This isn't a political statement, right? Not communism versus capitalism.
Not at all. It's presented as a purely functional designation. It's based on observed, alleged actions that, according to the source's analysis, fit the established legal definition of a terrorist organization.
And when you say alleged actions, what are we talking about?
We're talking about activities that cross a line from, say, digital espionage into truly horrifying physical crimes.
Okay.
The source cites the alleged targeting and harming of children as a way to harass opponents. They cite the targeting of civilian infrastructure with viruses.
And there was something else, something even more disturbing.
Yes. Perhaps the most disturbing claim is the reference to multiple credible reports concerning alleged organ harvesting.
From living human beings.
From living human beings. And they specifically mention practitioners of Falun Dafa, which is a spiritual practice that has been, heavily targeted by the CPC.
It's an incredible claim. It connects this sort of political oppression directly to a high-profit criminal enterprise.
It does. And it links back to this terrifying hypothesis the source developed when they were analyzing the network's internal database, the GeoIndex.
The GeoIndex, right. What was that again?
So this database allegedly contains detailed DNA markers of targets all over the world.
And the hypothesis isn't just that it's for identification.
No. The source hypothesizes that it's for a kind of grim matchmaking process. It connects wealthy individuals, people suffering from chronic illnesses who need a transplant.
With very poor, geographically scattered individuals who are designated as potential donors.
Precisely. The source sees this DNA marker data as a core component of the network's alleged terrorist operations.
So they're not just neutralizing political opponents.
They're allegedly monetizing them through organized crime, which gives the network this massive financial incentive to maintain absolute, total operational secrecy.
Okay, so if you're trying to build an enterprise like that, one that needs untraceable movement, perfect data aggregation, zero government oversight, that's where the strategy comes in.
And that's where this deep contradiction in the network's philosophy becomes so clear.
It's not about political ideology.
No, it's purely about maximizing control and ensuring impunity.
So what is the contradiction?
It's profound when you compare their internal policies versus their external strategies.
Okay.
Internally, so within their own country or aligned regimes, the source used Venezuela as an example, they aggressively promote and enforce the nationalization of strategic industries.
Right. Oil, steel, minerals. Classic state control.
The government maintains absolute authority over its assets. But the moment they look outward,
To countries like the U.S. or Western Europe.
they push relentlessly for the exact opposite. Massive privatization of those same strategic services.
Payments, location services, transportation, health info.
PayPal, Google Maps, WebMD, all of it.
And the key insight from the source is that this isn't just a philosophical difference, this is a weapon.
It's the deliberate weaponization of privatization.
Why? What's the advantage?
It's all about legal accountability, or rather, the lack of it. Commercial entities, unlike government agencies, operate with far fewer constraints.
For example.
The source notes that if a regulated government agency, let's say the Department of Transportation, deliberately manipulated map data to hide a house, they'd face immediate congressional and legal scrutiny.
Right, there would be hearings, investigations.
But a private commercial entity, using a globally dominant app like Google Maps,
What happens then?
they can allegedly manipulate that database, change a house location, obscure an entire facility, and if they get challenged, what do?
They just point to their terms of service.
Exactly. This is our proprietary data. We can do with it what we want. They're legally shielded while allegedly engaging in espionage and data theft.
So privatization creates a legally protected black hole for accountability.
That's the perfect way to put it. It's not about efficiency. It's about eliminating transparency and oversight,
Turning these everyday digital services into untraceable surveillance tools.
which connects directly back to the core operational strategy, the Take All Roads, TTP.
Tactic, technique, and procedure.
Right. And that TTP identifies systems that are, 1, globally necessary, and 2, that existed before 1998.
Why 1998? What's the significance of that year?
The source identifies 1998 as the watershed moment. That's when regulatory oversight of the burgeoning internet really began to decline.
So these are systems like mapping and finance that governments use to regulate meticulously.
Historically, yes. And the abdication process, that's what makes the switchover palatable to the public.
You have to make the old system look bad first.
Precisely. The government's existing regulated systems are either intentionally weakened or just allowed to become non-performant. Slow, expensive, buried in red tape.
The source mentioned New York taxi medallions as an example, right?
A perfect example. They became obscenely expensive, the system became corrupt. This deliberate decline maximizes what the source calls the delta.
The performance difference.
The difference between the clunky old system and the shiny, convenient, private tech solution that's introduced. Uber, PayPal, you name it.
It makes adopting the unregulated private solution a complete no-brainer for everyone.
And in doing so, you abolish all the protective regulations and centralization that were there for a reason.
And the source sees the same pattern playing out right now in new areas, new verticals where governments are just rushing to abdicate control.
They are, and this is creating new, massive, centralized aggregators that are just ripe for exploitation.
What's the first one?
The first crucial new target is digital passports and driver's licenses.
The move to phone-based QR codes for identity.
It creates a single, easily exploitable aggregator of personal identity. And the source warns that if that centralized control falls into the wrong hands,
The network could just issue IDs.
they could issue real or fake digital IDs for thousands of agents without ever having to go near a DMV or the State Department.
That streamlines their operations incredibly.
Yeah.
If you need to insert, say, 1,000 intelligence agents globally.
Bypassing all those diverse paper-based bureaucracies is a massive logistical win for them. A centralized digital ID aggregator makes that process instant and untraceable.
Okay, so identity's one. What's the second new aggregator?
Traffic cameras, specifically proprietary systems like Flock.
Right. You see those everywhere now.
They're private, they're solar-powered, they're incredibly convenient for local law enforcement, but their wireless access and consolidated data are a huge vulnerability.
How so?
The source explains that law enforcement officers often review the footage on their phones,
Okay.
and the encryption on a standard cellular transmission is, well, it's weak against the network's alleged intercept capabilities.
So they can just pull the footage right out of the air.
They can intercept it directly from the officer's phone connection. They get the video without ever needing a warrant or a traceable subpoena.
It's a shadow surveillance network built on the promise of convenience for law enforcement.
Precisely. And the third target they identified is airline ticketing.
How has that changed?
In the past, ticketing was closely tied to government oversight. You had IATA-like agencies ensuring security checks on passengers and cargo.
A regulated system.
A regulated system.
Yeah.
Now, globalized private QR code ticketing bypasses a lot of that security. The government loses regulatory control over who is traveling and what is being transported.
Making it exponentially easier for them to move agents, illicit cargo, whatever they need to, without a paper trail.
The pattern is undeniable. Foundational necessities, payments, location, health, transportation, and now identity are all migrating to these globally standardized private aggregators.
We're sacrificing accountability for efficiency every single time.
Every time.
Okay, so that sets the stage. Let's transition now into the core of the source material, the bits and bytes. The specific engineering flaws that let this network turn convenience into a weapon.
Right. But before we get into the really deep technical stuff, we have to understand the network's operational structure. The source calls it the bizarro state.
The bizarro state, what does that mean?
Think of it as a smaller, dedicated society. They estimate it's about 2% of the global population, and it's focused entirely on espionage and harassment.
And their key principle is something called the same-level attack.
The same-level attack, it's all about blending in. High-level agents in this bizarro state target their high-level peers in our society.
So a CEO targets a CEO.
Exactly. If you want to compromise the communication of a major CEO, you don't send some low-level hacker. You compromise the device of a fellow CEO or a high-ranking executive that they interact with.
So the agent is already an organic, trusted part of the target's environment.
Whether it's a board meeting, a presidential briefing, a high-security conference, they exploit the convenience of our always-on devices in places where we assume those devices are safe.
That blending is the operational key. But the technical vulnerability, that starts at the base layer.
The operating system, the biggest aggregator of them all.
And the source used Chrome OS as their main case study here. And the findings were not good.
Not good is an understatement. The source found unequivocal evidence of a keylogger.
A keylogger, so it's recording every single keystroke.
Every single one. And here's the kicker. It was found on freshly installed Chrome OS computers, brand new, purchased directly from major retail stores.
So this wasn't some supply chain attack on the hardware itself.
No, the consistency across different purchases suggested it was an OS level or maybe an installation exploit. It wasn't the physical chip.
And the source had a theory on how it got there, pointing straight at Google's own internal tools.
The suspected vector is a tool called the Google Mendel Experimentation Platform.
Mendel. Okay, what is that?
You shouldn't think of Mendel as a broad update system like Windows Update. Think of it as a surgical strike tool.
So it's for very specific targeting.
Incredibly specific. It allows Google engineers to target a tiny subset of users, not by name, but by these hyper-restrictive behavioral criteria.
Like what? Give me an example.
Something like users in zip code 90210 who downloaded this specific app and then searched for this specific term in the last 72 hours.
Wow. So instead of pushing a malicious update to millions of Chrome OS users, which would set off all kinds of alarms,
they inject a modified experimental version of the OS that contains the keylogger, but only to a tiny specific group of high-value targets.
making the exploit virtually undetectable through standard security monitoring.
Precisely. It's a tailor-made mechanism for highly targeted espionage. And what's more, the persistence of this keylogger was engineered for maximum data capture.
What do you mean?
It didn't need an active internet connection to work. It would continuously log keystrokes even when the computer was completely offline.
So when the user thinks they're safe, making private notes, drafting sensitive documents,
It's all being recorded, and the moment that device reconnected to the internet, it would transmit the entire backlog of captured keystrokes in one sudden data dump.
the implication for the average user is terrifying. I mean, the OS market is so consolidated. Windows and Mac OS are what, 90% of the market?
It's about that, yes. So if this can be done via an experimental platform on Chrome OS, it confirms that the OS is the primary attack surface for any state-level actor.
It confirms the capability and the intent. Okay, so from the OS, we move up the stack, the browser.
The next massive aggregator, handling most of our data traffic. And we're talking mainly about Chrome and Edge.
And this is where we get into a very specific critical flaw that the source identified, the Gen 204 vulnerability.
Yes. Let's slow down here because this is really important.
Okay, so for the listener, what is a Gen 204 and why is it so uniquely dangerous?
It's a specific type of HTTP response code. Chrome, in particular, is extremely chatty. It's always sending out requests in the background.
For what? Search suggestions, connection checks.
Background syncing, all of that. And many of these little requests generate a Gen 204 response.
And the critical feature of that response is what?
It has a 0 kilobyte payload. The body of the response is completely empty. It's literally nothing.
Okay, I'm still not getting it. Why does an empty response suddenly become the master key to decryption?
It's because of how cryptographic analysis works. So imagine you're an interceptor, you're listening to this chaotic encrypted radio signal.
Right, it's all just noise.
It's all noise, but you know that at specific, frequent intervals, that signal is supposed to transmit pure silence, a signal that is exactly 0 bytes long.
Okay.
So the interceptor captures the entire encrypted stream. Then they can just trivially cycle through potential decryption keys until they find the one key that, when they apply it to that specific part of the stream, results in a sequence of zeros. Nothing.
Uh-huh. So the 0 byte payload is like a known constant. It's a fingerprint that gives them the perfect testing ground.
It's the perfect cryptographic testing ground. And once they find that session key that successfully decrypts that tiny 0 byte segment,
that same key instantly unlocks the entire communications channel.
everything, your login credentials, your detailed search history, everything that traveled in that encrypted stream, the constant forced use of this vulnerable empty response turns every user session into an open book.
And the source, they spent a lot of time trying to fix this, didn't they? Trying to block it.
A lot of engineering time, yes. They tried to cage Chrome, as they put it, to stop it from making these aggressive background requests.
And what did they conclude?
That it was impossible. The dependency on this vulnerable request type is so deep, so fundamental to the browser's architecture, that the only practical defense they could come up with was to advise their own operators to just stop using Chrome entirely.
Wow. Just abandon ship. Okay, so if the OS is compromised and the browser is compromised, what about the foundation of the internet itself, the TCP/IP protocol layer?
And this is a weakness that's really built into the DNA of the modern internet. TCP/IP is the foundational protocol that ensures reliability.
Right. It makes sure all the data gets there.
It does that by requiring the receiving computer to send an acknowledgement, an ACK packet back to the sender for every single data packet it receives.
But that reliability, that becomes a massive security liability here.
Yeah.
How does that little ACK packet compromise the entire session?
So the downlinked, that's the data traveling from the server to your computer. That's the easiest channel for the network to intercept.
Okay.
Every time your computer sends that ACK packet back, it's providing vital, predictable network information. Things like the MC address, session sequence numbering.
So it's like a little flag saying, I'm here and this is who I am.
Think of it as a highly regular, measurable drum beat that's accompanying the complex encrypted music, which is your data.
And that drumbeat acts as a constant anchor.
A reliable, constant anchor. The interceptor uses the predictable timing and content of those ACK packets as the foundation for their cryptographic analysis. It lets them decrypt the entire stream that's anchored around those repeated signals.
That seems so fundamental. Was anything ever done to fix that?
Yes. This is exactly the problem that HTTP/3 was designed to solve.
Okay, so how does HTTP/3 fix it?
Well, HTTP/3 is built on a different protocol called UDP. And UDP is connectionless. It does not require acknowledgments.
Which makes it faster, but also more secure in this context.
Much stronger against this specific type of crypto analysis. Right. And this is the most concerning finding from the source. They observed what appears to be intentional manipulation to prevent the use of the stronger protocol.
What do you mean intentional manipulation? That's a huge claim.
It is, and we need to be very clear about the evidence. The source ran tests where they blocked the traditional TCP port 443, which is used by the weaker HTTP1 and HTTP2.
And what happened?
This forced the systems to use HTTP3 over UDP, and the services worked just fine, which proved that HTTP3 was available and functional.
Okay, so the better protocol is ready to go.
It was. Yet when they unblocked the old port, they observed that specific requests Requests for certain high-value Google assets were being intentionally forced by the software back to the weaker protocols.
Back to HTTP1 and HTTP2.
Yes, even when it caused failures or extreme slowdowns.
That doesn't sound like a bug. A system built for performance would just stick with the faster working protocol.
That's the source's conclusion. The system wasn't prioritizing connection efficiency. It was prioritizing connection accessibility via the vulnerable acknowledgement-based protocols.
So what does the source allege is happening?
They allege this behavior suggests internal manipulation, potentially by high-level agents embedded within the Google Chrome and search teams, to ensure that traffic remains accessible for interception by the CPC network.
So the vulnerability in this case isn't a bug. It's a deliberately preserved feature.
That's the allegation. And it elevates the threat level from just exploiting passive flaws to actively subverting any attempts to fix them.
Okay, given all of that, the OS, the browser, the protocol vulnerabilities, this brings us to countermeasures. What can anyone actually do?
The necessary countermeasures really fall into two categories. First, there are radical behavioral shifts for you, the individual. And second, there are massive, long-term systemic fixes.
Let's start with what the individual can control right now. The source talks a lot about eliminating session anchors, especially cookies.
Session cookies are they're insidious for this kind of work. The session cookie ID and even fixed header names like setCookie are small, fixed strings of data.
And they stay the same across multiple requests.
They're constant. Just like the ACK packet was an anchor at the protocol level, the cookie ID is the perfect constant anchor for crypto analysis at the application level. It makes decryption trivially easy for the attacker.
And to fight this, the source lays out this protocol that sounds less like browsing the web and more like a security ritual.
It's called the four-step search ritual, and it really just demonstrates how completely broken our current security architecture is.
Okay, walk us through it. What's step one?
Step one. Always start with a completely empty browser instance. No old tabs, no old sessions, a clean slate.
Step two.
Open a new incognito window, which, it's not a silver bullet, but it provides necessary containerization for the session.
And then step three, this is the critical one, right?
This is the most important step. Before you do anything else, you must manually go into the settings and delete all cookies for all time.
To get rid of that fixed anchor string entirely.
You have to wipe it from the device. And then step four. You perform one single search query, you do not click on any of the results, and you immediately close the entire window.
Wow. That is an immense amount of work for one single secure search.
It's completely impractical for normal life, and it shows how utterly broken the basic architecture is when you're up against determined state actors.
So it's an unsustainable individual defense. What's the long-term systemic fix for cookies?
The solution has to come from the standards bodies. The W3C needs to recognize this and deprecate the current cookie standard.
And replace it with what?
They should be replaced by dynamic multi-kilobyte certificates that are randomized and that change with every single request.
So the anchor is constantly moving.
If the anchor changes every time, the attacker has no fixed point for their analysis. And they should also move away from easily identifiable fixed header names, removing another predictable anchor.
Okay, so changing global standards could take years. What's the most radical personal change someone can make right now? This gets to the application layer and the push model.
Right. The single greatest systemic weakness we have is the convenience we demand. The modern push model.
Constant notifications, always on connections.
Keeping dozens of browser tabs open. Every single one of those open tabs, every background app like Gmail, is constantly making dozens of network requests.
Many of them using that vulnerable Gen 204 being forced onto weaker protocols.
Exactly. So having 50 tabs open multiplies your data leakage exponentially. It provides a continuous stream of data for interception.
So the behavioral adaptation required is, it's fundamentally anti-convenience.
It's radical. The only real individual fix is to treat your mobile device and your computer not as a constant companion, but as a tool you use deliberately.
Meaning?
Meaning you keep your mobile devices in airplane mode whenever possible. You only connect briefly when you absolutely need to send or receive data.
You're just limiting the interception window?
To a few minutes at a time. It prevents the network from building up that continuous history of packets and session data that they need for their analysis.
But let's be realistic. The average person is not going to live in airplane mode. It's just too impractical.
It is for mass adoption, you're right, which is why the systemic fix is just as critical.
And the source proposes a surprisingly simple OS-level solution for this.
Extremely simple. Develop a feature where network access is automatically shut off for any application or browser tab that is not currently in focus.
So if I click away from a tab, it just goes silent on the network.
Its network communication immediately ceases until you click back. The source estimated an engineer could build this in a few hours.
And it would destroy the vast majority of silent background data leakage.
Instantly.
This entire analysis, from the strategic contradictions to these deep engineering flaws, it all seems to point back to one core solution.
Which is reversing the abdication of government responsibility.
The ultimate goal has to be destroying the aggregator model itself.
It has to be. And the source argues something that sounds counterintuitive to us now. They argue that fragmentation, which we are all taught to hate because it's inefficient,
Is actually a desirable security property.
think about it. A financial system with 180 different national payment processors, all with their own distinct national laws and protocols, that is exponentially harder to attack.
Whereas a single, undeclared global monopoly aggregator
Is a single point of failure. The attack vector is always the aggregator.
So by forcing everything onto these unified private platforms, governments have basically traded national security for commercial efficiency,
They have. And that requires a very strong regulatory response to fix.
which means the final proposal is for a complete re-engagement by government in these core services.
It is. Governments have to step back in. They have to reclaim control of strategic foundational services like payment processing and GIS mapping.
Even if it means creating new nationalized digital infrastructure.
It might. Or new highly regulated public-private partnerships. But it's necessary to reintroduce accountability, transparency, and national security into the digital services that our entire society now runs on.
Because allowing digital convenience to create these unaccountable global monopolies.
Inevitably leads to their weaponization by foreign actors.
This has been a really comprehensive, if a bit chilling, operational review. I think the critical takeaway for me is that convenience, especially the highly centralized, unregulated kind we all love, it's in direct inverse proportion to systemic security.
It is. And we are left with a fundamental choice. Do we continue to accept the hyper-efficient commercial aggregator model and the total lack of accountability that comes with it?
Or do we demand robust regulatory and governmental control over the services that really define our society?
The network strategy is crystal clear. They exploit foundational, must-have global necessities. They do it by promoting their privatization and ensuring the government alternatives become obsolete. They exploit the fact that we will choose efficiency over security every single time.
So as you move forward with this knowledge, understanding the architectural flaws in your browser, your OS, the very protocols underneath it all, we want to leave you with a provocative thought.
If the network's core strategy is to identify and aggressively take over these foundational, globally necessary human services by privatizing them, we've talked about payments, identity, location, health.
What foundational component of human existence will be the next to be aggressively taken over and weaponized for control?